Hello everyone, my name is Jacob, and today I'm going to be talking about the complete, or at least almost complete, timeline for the story of Mice and Men. Of Mice and Men is a story that takes place in the Great Depression, to be exact, 1932. It was released in 1937 by John Steinbeck, and was an instant hit. The book explores a theme of isolation and loneliness, where our characters George and Lenny try to save money and find a farm or land to own for themselves. Now, some of the things in this timeline may not be perfectly accurate, so for the purpose of the timeline, I'll just make up the ages here and put them in a list. First, we'll talk about our main people we'll be talking about in this timeline. These are the people that are the most important to the timeline, and we'll be talking about them a lot. We'll first start with George and Lenny, who we'll assume are the same age as they have been together throughout most of life. We can assume they're both 30 years old, as they're not too young and they're not too old, as well as fitting their descriptions throughout the book. Next, we'll talk about Curly and Curly's wife. We know Curly's wife is not too young, but not too old. She is young, so we'll say she is about 23 years old. And for Curly, we'll say he's slightly older than his wife, and that he is 25 years old. Now we'll talk about more of the side characters. Crooks is described as a young man but with an arched back, so we'll say he's about 20 years old. Candy is an old but wise man, so we'll say he's 74. Slim, the prince of the ranch, is a nice and wise fellow. He's definitely middle-aged, so I'll say he's 47. Rather, a lot is unknown about Carlson, so I'll just give him the ripe age of 55 based off his description. And finally, just to make this longer, I'll add Candy's dog, which is special. Candy says he's herded sheep with the dog as well as been with it since it was a pup, so say Candy was 56 when he got his dog. This means that the dog is actually 18 years old, which is much longer than expected for a dog of its size. And finally, for the unknown characters such as Wit, Susie, Bill Tenner, Clara, and Andy Crushman, I won't be giving them any ages as very little is known about them. And finally, onto the timeline. This took a while to make, so any feedback would be appreciated. And once again, before we start, spoilers ahead, read the book before, preferably, and enjoy! (1858). Candy is born. Candy is one of the side characters within the book. When he catches wind of George and Lenny's dream, he decides to help out with the money he's gathered over his lifetime. He doesn't have many friends other than his dog, which he spent years training for herding. 1862. Selena's Valley Farm is founded. From the sources I could find, Selena's Valley is the most likely place for the book to take place. The farm most likely started as a cheese farm due to the dairy demand in the area. 1862 to 1877. The owner of the farm is born. Not much is known about the owner of the farm, so I'm just speculating that he was born around this time. 1877. Carlson is born. Carlson is another side character that has little significance in the story. Although he is the one who wants to and eventually kills Candy's dog, not much more happens to him after that. 1885. Slim is born. Known as the Prince of the Farm, Slim is a nice fellow with good morals and great skills. The ironic thing about Slim's character is that he is everything that Curly isn't. 1902. Lenny and George are born. Lenny was born with unfortunate qualities, and George was born pretty much normally. Lenny's qualities allowed him to grow at a faster rate than normal. Unfortunately, his brain did not do the same, and it's assumed that Lenny is either autistic or has ADHD. George grew normally, and was told by Aunt Clara to take care of Lenny when she is gone. This leads to George and Lenny sticking together pretty much all the time. 1907. Curly is born. The boss of the farm has a son. Curly is the main antagonist in the book, and due to his small stature, tries to act big and tough. He likes to fight, and when he loses, he always blames someone else for him losing. 1907 to 1909. The farm is bought. It is unknown when the farm was actually bought, but I speculate that it is around this time when it is. 1909. Curly's wife is born. Curly's wife is born in a small town and is forced to stay with her mother throughout most of her youth. She has always had a dream of wearing nice clothes and living in nice places. Unfortunately, she's now stuck with Curly later in life. 1912. Crooks is born. Crooks is a character of African American descent, leading to others being racist to him. He's a tough fellow that keeps to himself usually. He has an arched back due to all the work he's been doing, as well as bad posture. He is also given his own room due to the racial profiling, and it's around now when George starts to care about Lenny after making him jump into a river. 1912 to 1917. Candy and Slim most likely get hired. It's not really known when everybody gets hired, but I'm just going to put this here because it makes the most sense. Now we've made it about halfway through the timeline. You can probably tell that because the music in the background's gone, but now I'm going to start the more modern timeline. This is the timeline towards the future when most of the events in the book take place. (1917 to 1921). Curly's wife finds her first love. Curly's wife has a run-in with the circus and decides to abandon her mother for a man she met there. That man then abandons her with the promise of sending her letters of his adventures, which he never sends. 1921 to 1927. Curly and his wife meet. Curly and his wife meet each other and instantly get married. Curly then brings her to the farm where she spends the rest of her life. Carlson and Whit also get hired into the farm around this time. It is also around this time where Andy Crushman, one of George and Lenny's friends, gets thrown into jail. 1927 to 1931. Crooks gets hired. Crooks gets hired onto the farm, and there's nothing much else to say about this. And now we start getting into the main book events. 1931, late winter. Bill Tenner quits his job at the farm. Bill Tenner is one of the past workers of the farm. He enjoyed reading a magazine in which he sent his fan mail to the publisher, in hopes of getting added to the magazine. 1932, early spring. Lenny gets in trouble. Back in Weed, Lenny got in trouble for holding onto a girl's dress a little too hard. This caused her to freak out, and a manhunt issued on Lenny. This also leads to George and Lenny having to flee Weed in search for a new job. 1932, Friday, early spring. Lenny and George find a new job. With their work tickets, Lenny and George get a job at the Salina Valley farm. They are introduced to the workers, and they don't work the Friday as they had just arrived. George plays a lot of solitaire this day, which is kinda odd. This is also the point in the book where we are introduced to the big dream Lenny and George have. Saturday, early spring. Lenny and George finally start their work. Lenny and George finally start their work with Slim's team. The other workers remark on Lenny's strength and hard work he's able to do. That night, Carlson talks about Candy's dog being too old for it to live peacefully, so he confronts Candy to talk to him about getting rid of the dog. After some back and forth, Candy gives in, and his dog is shot. While Slim and Carlson are away, George and Lenny talk about the big dream, and Candy overhears them, opting to help them with the money he's gathered to buy the farm of their dreams, as well as work alongside them. That night, Curly and Lenny get in a fight, which results in Curly's hand breaking. They all agree to blame the incident on a machine. Curly is rushed to the hospital. Sunday, early spring. Lenny talks with Crooks. Early in the morning, all of the men except Candy, Lenny, Crooks, and Curly's wife have left for the tavern to have fun and relax. Back on the farm, Lenny interacts with Crooks and is curious about why he has his own room to himself. Crooks then tells Lenny what it's like to be lonely and scares him by saying, "What if George left and never came back?" After the conversation, Candy also joins in and all three discuss the big dream idea, in which Crooks asks if he could join in. Then, out of nowhere, Candy's wife comes in, laughs in all of their faces, which Crooks tells her to go away, leading her to say that Crooks has no right talking back to her, and that he has no power. She then remarks on the bruises on Lenny's face, and figures out what the machine Curly got his hand caught in was. Monday, early spring. Lenny gets in trouble again. This is the final day of the book, and where all of the final events take place. After a long day of working, everyone is outside playing horseshoe and bidding their money. Meanwhile, Lenny is in the barn with the dog that he was promised, although it's dead. Lenny is trying to find a way to hide the evidence of him accidentally killing it, and while thinking to himself about how he won't get to tend to the rabbits, Curly's wife enters and questions what Lenny is doing. Lenny eventually explains, and Curly's wife asks why he's obsessed with rabbits. Lenny replies with, "I like touching soft things." Curly's wife relates to Lenny and demonstrates with her hair, which she allows Lenny to touch. But when Lenny touches it a little too hard, she freaks out, leading Lenny to put his hand over her mouth to quiet her down. Lenny does this in fear of getting in any more trouble than he already was in. But due to her struggle, Lenny gets mad and shakes her a little too hard, killing her. Realizing what he's done, Lenny decides to run away to the safe spot set up by George. When Candy eventually looks for Lenny in the barn, he finds Curly's wife's dead body. He goes to George to tell him what he found. After George saw the body, he decided that telling the rest of the men and finding Lenny was the best course of action. After the men were called in to see the body, they decided that killing Lenny is the best course of action, and so the manhunt was started. George, knowing there was no stopping Lenny from being killed, he reluctantly joined along for the hunt. After a while of searching, George knew exactly where Lenny had gone. He found him by the brush where he told him to go if anything had happened. After having some time to think to himself before George found him, Lenny asks George to talk about the big dream. George complies and tells Lenny about the big dream while pulling out the gun he stole from Carlson. And while finishing up the story of the big dream, he points the gun at the back of Lenny's head and fires, bringing an end to the book. Hey, I really hope you enjoyed the timeline. Once again, this thing isn't final. I might update it in the future. If you have anything you want to add, please add a comment in the description or below. And keep watching the video after for the blooper reel. And other than that, I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you when I have another school project I can post. (1862) Salinas Valley is the most likely. The ironic, that's Lenity's John F. Lenity. Okay. He is also given his own room due to racial profile. It's about now when Crooks gets hired onto the farm, and not to mention, well, this no. Back in Weed, Lenny got in trouble for what? Saturday, early spring. Lenny and George start the store. Sunday, early morning. What? No, that's not right. After the. Oh wow! I put two laughs in all of their faces, which cooks. He goes to George. Tell him what he found. Yeah, I'm going to redo that. Having some Lenny asks George to talk about the from a wiki. Oh,